Razer Blade 15 Base Plus. Let's take a look. Yo, what up YouTube? Crash Wilcox, and got another laptop review for you today, and we are looking at the 2020 Razer Blade 15. So I said Razer Blade 15 Plus because this is the 4K OLED version with the 2070 Max Q. So a little bit of a plus there, I think, depending on what your needs are, and we'll sort of dig into that during this review. So during this review, we're going to kind of just take a look at the overall laptop. We'll take a look at some of the, ports, the specs. Then we'll jump into some benchmarks, and then I'll come back with my final thoughts on this laptop. And then stick around. If you've watched this channel for any amount of time, I just did a recent laptop review on an HP Spectre, and I'm going to try to do a sort of comparison between these two, just because I think they do have some comparisons, and they're in that same rough price range, or at least they were when I bought them. And it was just a decision I made between the two, so I think it's a worthwhile comparison. So we'll take a look at that as well. But with that being said, let's just take a look at this baby. So the Razer Blade 15, this is the Mercury White, obviously, which I believe you can only get in the 4K variant, which is something that I actually, I really wanted. I did have the opportunity to get the regular base, the 144 hertz, but a couple reasons made me decide to go with this one over it. Obviously, I like the look of it better than the black with the neon green snake. I don't dislike that one. It still looks nice, but it's just not as appealing to me as the Mercury White option. But the other thing that I want, two other things. I like the screen color, the accuracy, and just the brightness of this. I believe it's almost 600 nits of brightness. Completely color accurate, factory calibrated, which is nice. And because I don't really play first person shooters and stuff, the 144 hertz screen wasn't terribly important to me. So, but whatever, we'll get into that here in just a second. So the Mercury White, it looks wonderful. It's got a small, subdued, light gray snake there, the triple-headed snake that Razer is famous for. And it looks really nice all the way around. It's got that solid, aluminum unibody design that Razer has come to be known for. Super premium feel and construction. It passes the all-important, one finger lift test, which everybody seems to be so, up in arms about. It does pass that test. So looking around here on the I/O, you got like your little Kensington lock or whatever happens to be. It's got the full-size HDMI, 2 USB-A ports, and a USB Type-C. And then on the opposite side here, you've got your little Razer proprietary power adapter. You got your Ethernet port. I think it's another USB-A. This is USB-C and Thunderbolt 3. And then you got your audio jack. I believe I'll throw up on the screen here. I don't remember off the top of my head what those USB-A ports are. I I'll throw them up on the screen. You're probably reading them now. So that's what they are. But the I/O selection, or the port selection on this laptop, I think is fantastic. You know, you lose out on the micro SD. You know, if you went with the advanced model of this, I think you get a micro SD card, but you lose out on the Ethernet port, which in my perspective, and obviously I bought this, so it is my perspective, I'd prefer to have the Ethernet port over a micro SD. You know, you can buy cheap little dongles on Amazon for $10-15 to give you a Type C to micro SD card, you know, reader. It's not very complicated, you know, so that's really the only thing that I think you lose here on the port selection. Outside of that, 2 USB-Cs, 3 USB-As, full-size HDMI is very nice port selection to pair up with that Ethernet. I believe it's gigabit Ethernet in there as well. So port selection on this thing is fantastic, and it does not allow for USB Type-C charging. I believe the advanced model does. So you can only charge using the Razer power adapter, which, you know, is a bit of a pain that it's proprietary, though it does work well, you know, but it can be a bit of a pain not having sort of a universal power adapter. I haven't noticed an issue with it, but yeah. So that's the port selection. It's wonderful. Getting into the specs a little bit. So this has the i7, 10750H. And let me try to log this thing in. Yeah, so this has the i7 10750H, which is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU. I believe its base clock is 2.6 gigahertz. Boost clock, it says up to 5 gigahertz. I've not seen that. I've seen upwards of 4.5 to like 4.6, but that's about as far as I've seen it go. But one of the selling points for me on this as well is that it comes with the 2070 Max Q, and that's the 8 gigabit version. Now, Max Qs are not full powered 2070s, but it's still a powerful GPU. Still comes with the tensor cores for some ray tracing. It still has the NVENC encoder. And largely what drew me towards this model over the traditional base model, which is the 144 hertz, is that 2070. So the 144 hertz model comes with a 2060 Max Q, which is still a great GPU, but I wanted a little extra GPU power since I do a little more content creation than I do gaming. And even when I do game, I don't typically game, you know, FPS or, you know, competitive esports or anything like that where high frame rates are going to affect me a ton. And so that's why I went with that. It also comes with a 512 gigabyte SSD, M.2 NVMe, which is a pretty quick, it's got a pretty decent M.2 in it. And I'll throw up on the screen right now the Crystal Dismark scores. So they're pretty good. You know, no real reason I see to upgrade that. Though this does give you the opportunity to upgrade your SSD and your RAM. So it comes with 2 M.2 slots. So, like I said, it's got a pretty decent M.2 that it comes with. I did also include in here, because it is upgradable, just a 1 terabyte 970 EVO. So since the original M.2 was fast enough, I left the OS on there, no issues, and just used that 970 EVO for everything else, basically. It comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and that is upgradable to 64 gigs, which is another thing that I wanted to have the opportunity to do, was upgrade. I haven't upgraded it yet, but the RAM should be coming. So because I do a lot of content creation, just having a little more extra RAM to throw around can help you out there. So I like that as well. What else? do you guys care about? The screen, like I said, is 4K OLED. It's beautiful. Let's see if we can get some of this brightness. I don't want that. We want this. So it can go 600 nits roughly, I believe, of brightness. But what I also like, it's a 60 hertz monitor like most 4K monitors are, but it claims to have a 1 millisecond response time, which you don't normally get, so that's, I think, if a decent trade-off, right? If you're trying to game, you may not get all the hertz, but at least you're getting a quick response time. You don't have some laggy mouse. Like when I did the review of the Zephyrus G14, had, I think, a 43 second or millisecond response time. So definitely a trade-off there, I would say. I mean, still probably not going to make a big difference, but I don't know. I like to have it. It's nice. And gaming on this thing is not bad. So that's sort of the general specs on this thing. And overall, I mean, yeah, well, let's just say, so it does come with a single zone RGB backlit keyboard. So you can set that up inside of your Razer Synapsys software and change that to be whatever you want. Single color, but you can, there's a lot of different variations to breathing, the static, and all those different sorts of things that you can change. It's got the two traditional Razer top fire speakers, and I will say the speakers are pretty nice. And I also like that they have the power button a little bit, it's not necessarily hidden, I guess, but it's sort of hidden and out of the way, just sort of blends in a little bit and looks nice and clean. The trackpad is large like they typically are. It feels wonderful. The response to it is great. I have not noticed any sort of, palming issues when you're typing or anything like that. It seems to work really well. And then on the bottom, you can see it's just got the two cutouts for the fans there. And then, as has been kind of the case for Razer in recent years, I guess, the bottom plate is super easy to take off. I believe it's like 8 or 10 screws total. And it really just slides off. There's no real hassle you have to do with sort of popping it off. It just comes off super easy. Very simple to throw in the M.2s. And what's nice about this is it actually comes with that second M.2 slot. It has its own screw already, which is not always the case. It's an inexpensive thing to do for Razer, but it's a nice touch when you open this up and there's already a screw in there to secure your M.2. So that's a nice touch. So I think that's kind of the specky stuff that I want to say to get out of the way. So let's go ahead and jump into these benchmarks, and then I will come back with my final thoughts. All right, so there you have it. So the reason, like I said, that I got this was content creation, and I am very pleased with it. You've seen the way that it renders videos. I mean, I use Filmora 9, which I know not everybody uses, but I didn't want to download Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve just to make one little video clip. But you can see it utilizes the hardware well. And let me just make a small plug. Use Filmora 9. It's better. Unless you're like making real movies, use Filmora 9. It's better. But it renders quickly, 1080p, 4K, whatever you happen to be rendering in. It uses the hardware well. And, the gameplay footage, Metro Exodus, you can play at 4K on here if you choose to. You're not going to get the full 60 FPS, but the game looks beautiful. The screen, the colors are wonderful in this thing. All around is if you're I would say an RPG type of single player gamer, this is fantastic for gaming. The 2070 does a fantastic job. The screen looks beautiful. I talked about the 1 millisecond response time on the mouse, so it's not really laggy there. It games great. It does tend to get a little bit warm, but that's to be expected with that much power in a laptop. So I don't think that's a negative. It's to be expected. So the only real complaint that I have with this laptop so far is the keyboard. I'm not a big fan of the Razer keyboard. First off, I like having a number pad. Granted, I knew going into this that this doesn't have a number pad. I'm not blind. But just simply typing on it, the way the keys are laid, maybe it's just me that I'm not terribly familiar with that layout, but I feel like I'm constantly reaching or missing keys. And I'm not a great typer. I'm not some world-class typer, but I type enough that I'm fairly competent in it. But I feel like on this keyboard, it's just a little slower. You have to be a little more methodical, and the keys just don't feel quite as good. So I would say that's maybe my only downside that I've noticed so far in this laptop is the keyboard. And everything else has just been fantastic. I couldn't be happier with this laptop for what it does. I have not yet hooked it up to any sort of external monitor, but I'm sure if you did maybe want to go out and pick up maybe a 1080p 144 hertz monitor, if you wanted to get into that sort of gaming, I'm sure it would game just fine on something like that. There's plenty of power in this laptop to run a game at those settings for sure. So that's sort of the review of the laptop. Please let me know what you think. If you found this at all useful, please take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I will be having a 30-day follow-up with this to kind of tell you how I feel after using it for some time, if maybe any of my thoughts change. But then I'll also be having sort of a look between two different roughly $2,000 laptops, between this and the HP Spectre. Maybe kind of give you some compare and contrast between the two. And if maybe it just is a helping suggestion for anybody that may be looking into this laptop. If you own this, maybe consider throwing down any pros and cons that you've found in the laptop. That might help me out as well. And I would certainly appreciate it. I know the other people that are considering buying this would appreciate that. So that's all I got for you guys. Until next time, God bless.